The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Ocarina of Time. By Ganondorf 8. December 27, 2014. Chapter 24, Secrets Revealed.
Are you alright, Sunset Shimmer?
Asked Spike.
I'm fine, as I got used to landing on my rear a long time ago. What in the world happened to that flower that caused it to erupt into this weird-looking tree stump?
I asked. I found myself staring at some kind of plump little tree stump that had a rather cute smile across its face, and that seemed to be the only expression it was capable of displaying.
Did you just seriously refer to the Deku tree sprout as a tree stump?
Asked Spike.
That's the sprout you told me about before? That little fellow is going to grow up and become the next great Deku tree in a few centuries or so. I'll give him the satisfaction of wanting to live up to the expectations placed upon him, but I honestly can't see that becoming the big tree behind him.
I replied.
You just have to imagine what he will look like, and the future generations of Kokiri will be turning to him for guidance as he serves them as the guardian spirit. Since we defeated Phantom Ganon and rescued Saria, the Kokiri forest has returned to normal, and the Deku tree sprout is now able to grow and flourish. Still, I wasn't expecting him to have such a goofy-looking smile,
said Spike.
And you called me out for calling him a tree stump,
I said, referring to the fact that he just called the little guy's face goofy. Still, it felt good knowing that the entire forest had returned to normal. It was at this point that I decided to go back to the village in order to see how everyone was doing, but as I turned around, I heard the sound of rustling and looked back to see that the Deku tree sprout was shaking its branches as though he didn't want me to leave. I had no choice but to go as I was needed elsewhere, so as I started to walk away, the sprout rustled its branches even harder, which was enough to grab my attention. I turned around again and walked back in order to see what he wanted.
If you wanted my attention so badly, you got it. If you are feeling upset that I called you a tree stump, then I am sorry for insulting you.
None taken, said the Deku tree sprout.
Waah!
I screamed upon the realization that this sprout was able to talk.
You didn't have to scream, you know,
sighed Spike.
It's not like I knew he was going to say something to me now, did I?
I asked.
Okay, I'll give you that, seeing as you have been making a habit of freaking out every time someone catches you by surprise,
replied Spike.
Can I help it if I react that way because someone decided to just show up out of nowhere, or do something that I wasn't prepared? But, that's water under the bridge, as I'm relaxed and ready to listen to the Deku tree sprout,
I said.
Hi there. I'm the Deku tree sprout. We already figured that part out already, so there was no need for you to say that,
I said.
Because you and Saria were able to break the curse on the forest temple, I am now able to grow and flourish as the new guardian spirit of the forest. Thank you very much for doing that for me. I really appreciate it. You are Sunset Shimmer, yes? I have heard from the forest spirits that you prefer to be called by that name instead of the name of Link. By the way, did you notice that when you talked to some of your old friends in the village, they didn't recognize you even though you haven't changed?
Asked the Deku tree sprout.
I was meant to have aged 7 years physically, but my magic has kept me the same,
I replied.
That means your magic is very rare, even among the most powerful magic users of Hyrule, to be able to do something like that, but you did dodge my question. So please don't ignore me like that, as what I have to say is most important,
said the Deku tree sprout.
Since you brought that up, my answer to you is yes,
I said.
That's because the Kokiri never age at all compared to the other tribes. Even after 7 years, they are still kids even though they age mentally like everyone else does. I'm sure that you have probably figured it out by now, but if not then that's okay as I shall reveal to you the secret which has been kept from you your entire life. You are not a Kokiri but rather a Hylian. It's such a great honor to at long last reveal this to you,
said the Deku tree sprout.
I'm not a member of the Kokiri tribe? How is that possible? I mean, I have a fairy partner, I'm wearing the clothing of the Kokiri, and according to everyone else, I've been living here in the forest ever since I was little,
I said.
Your frustration right now is to be expected, Sunset Shimmer, as you are confused, but allow me to explain everything to you, so please listen carefully. Long ago, before this country was unified into a country by the old king of Hyrule, a terrible war waged across this world known as the Imprisoning War according to historians. During the waning days of the conflict, a young Hylian mother and her baby girl escaped from the ravages of bloodshed and entered this forbidden forest. The mother was gravely injured and would not survive for much longer, but she pleaded with the great Deku tree to protect her child from the war. The Deku tree sensed that this child was one who had a great destiny, so he took the child into the forest and raised her as a Kokiri. The mother would soon pass away, and the child was raised with no knowledge of her true heritage. Only the great Deku tree knew the truth and kept the secret,
said the Deku tree sprout.
That is an interesting story, but it's not my actual origin, I said. I know that it's difficult for you to accept the truth for what it is, but it will take time for it to really sink in,
said the Deku tree sprout.
No, what I mean is that my mother back in Equestria is still very much alive even though I haven't spoken to her for years, and I definitely wasn't forced to run away from some kind of terrible war, so maybe you have got your facts wrong, I said.
That was when I realized as well as remembered that this was a video game world, and that I was portraying the character named Link, and this must have been how he ended up in the forest to begin with. I couldn't help but feel sorry for him even though I had no idea who he was. Even though it was lying to myself, my family, and the Deku tree sprout, I had to accept Link's origins as my own in order to avoid any further conflict.
Sorry. I didn't mean to accuse you of saying the wrong thing, as the truth is, what I said just now was a lie, and that learning the truth about how I came to be here has really opened my eyes. You were a Hylian, and were always bound to leave this forest,
said the Deku tree sprout.
Then how do you explain how I mean Saria, being able to leave the forest as well?
I asked.
Her destiny was to become one of the 6 sages, and she was also bound to leave the forest. Now that you know about your destiny, Sunset Shimmer, you know what you must do. That's right. You must break the curses on all of the other temples, and restore peace to Hyrule,
replied the Deku tree sprout. I have to admit that his conclusion was rather anticlimactic as well as pretty obvious considering no one else is trying to save the kingdom, so I merely shrugged my shoulders and turned around in order to leave the forest. As soon as I entered the village, I could tell that things had gotten back to normal as the big Deku Babas were gone, and the Kokiri were back outside and resuming their usual activities. It must have felt nice to not have a care in the world, and not be burdened with the task of saving an entire kingdom. Before I decided to leave the forest, there was one more thing I needed to take care of, and that was informing Diamond Tiara that Fluttershy wasn't coming back. While I could have just left and not tell her anything, that would have made me no better than her. No, she deserved to know the truth and perhaps begin to change her ways now that someone close to home has gone and can never return.
Come on, Spike. We're going back to the Lost Woods in order to see Diamond Tiara,
I said.
Who?
Asked Spike.
You know, Mito, or as I know her, Diamond Tiara, but that's besides the point. We need to go back and see her as she deserves the right to know that Fluttershy won't be returning to the forest,
I replied.
I'd say this whole experience has made you into a better person,
said Spike.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far,
I began.
Are you kidding me? Before you never would have confronted Mito about anything because of how she has treated you, and now you're taking the time to go to her and explain the situation. If I didn't know any better, you were trying to bury the hatchet between you two. Saria was right in that you two needed to get along, and now is the perfect time to start doing so even if you'll be leaving the forest again after this,
said Spike.
Right,
I said before going quiet as I started to make my way towards the entrance of the Lost Woods. I wanted to explain to Spike that I wasn't a better person, yet it had nothing to do with my past this time, which is what I originally believed. Something happened to me during that battle with Phantom Ganon, and I couldn't get it out of my mind no matter how hard I tried. While I did end up defeating him in the end and rescuing Fluttershy in the process, at the same time it felt like I failed miserably. My emotional state. Just like what happened against Ganondorf. My emotions went out of control and I achieved a greater power, but that was what I was now afraid of. No, I can't focus on that issue right now as I need to focus on speaking to Diamond Tiara. As I entered the Lost Woods and moved from clearing to clearing, the darkness from before had lifted despite it still being night out, and the big Deku Babas were no longer growing everywhere. I was concerned with what became of Grog as he was on the verge of transforming into a Stalfos, but maybe he managed to escape from the forest before the change was completed. Wishful thinking, I know, but I was hopeful that would be the case.
Oh, it's you from before,
said Diamond Tiara as I entered the clearing where she was still standing, and she noticed me instantly, which prompted her to walk forward to meet me halfway.
Judging from the fact that you came from over there, you either got lost and finally managed to get out hours later, or you made it all the way to the forest temple only to end up turning back at the last minute when you realized things were too intense for you. I was able to reach the temple, and destroyed the evil that had been affecting the forest,
I said.
That does explain the sudden disappearance of all those monsters. You did a pretty good job there, miss, for someone who doesn't appear to be using that fancy sword on her back. Yeah, I've heard from the forest spirits that there was someone who entered the temple armed with a sword, but ended up not using it in favor of more unconventional weaponry,
said Diamond Tiara.
You have?
I asked.
It takes someone really creative and determined to want to think outside of the box and not use a sword to solve all of their problems. A lot of people could learn a thing or two from you. By the way, I noticed that Saria isn't with you, so where she is?
Asked Diamond Tiara.
That's actually the reason I came back here,
I replied.
To tell me what has become of her?
Asked Diamond Tiara.
Yes, as I feel that you deserve to know the truth, seeing as you did accompany her all the way out here. Saria. She won't be coming back to the forest because destiny has chosen her to become the Sage of Forest. If you were hoping that she was going to be walking through that tunnel behind you, and returning with you back to your village, you'll be waiting here forever for something that will never happen,
I replied.
I see. So she isn't coming back?
Asked Diamond Tiara.
You were the first Kokiri who knows the truth, as I believe that you can inform the rest of your people of what has happened,
I replied.
I'm not sure what to make of this revelation, but I suppose that you are telling me the truth, as what would you gain from lying to me about it? Throughout my entire life, I've never had the notion or the inkling of wanting to show care for someone who meant such a great deal to me and to the others, but once you realize that person is gone, you can never achieve that hidden feeling as it's too late. I don't blame you for informing me of what happened to Saria, as you did what your heart was telling you, and my heart is telling me that I have been nothing but a horrible person for far too long. Is this my punishment for the way I acted? Maybe, but whatever it is, I deserve it,
said Diamond Tiara.
Will you be okay?
I asked.
Right now, I would like some time alone to be with my thoughts, as I really need to think about all that you have told me. I am grateful to you, miss, for telling me and all, but this is something I need to figure out, so if you don't mind me saying so, I would like for you to leave,
replied Diamond Tiara.
I understand,
I said.
Before you go, I do have one small favor to ask of you. If you manage to see Link during your travels, I want you to tell her that I'm sorry for everything that I've ever done to her. While it probably doesn't make any sense to you, just know that everything that's happened here lately has gotten me thinking that maybe I was wrong about her. Please, if you could let her know, I'd forever be grateful to you,
said Diamond Tiara.
I'm sure that she already knows how you feel, but I will make sure that she gets your message,
I said as I turned around and started to walk back to the village. Who would have thought that Diamond Tiara of all people could end up having a change of heart? This whole experience must have made her realize what can happen if you allow darkness to consume your heart, and I think she is going to be a much stronger person for it. I just wish that I could be feeling the same way considering what happened to me in the forest temple. I quickly glanced back at the master's sword which remained firmly in the scabbard on my back, and wondered if I could truly use it properly without having to rely on my transformation.
That was awful kind of you to speak to me like that,
said Spike.
Hey? What?
I asked in confusion.
I said that you were kind to have gone and talked to Mito regarding what happened with Saria,
replied Spike.
Oh, that. It was a necessary thing for me to do as she needed some closure,
I said.
Is something bothering you? Ever since we defeated Phantom Ganon, you've been awfully distant, like something was on your mind. You can talk to me about it if you want to, Sunset Shimmer, as I am here for you when you need me,
said Spike.
Something is bothering me, but I'm not sure how I go about explaining it,
I said. While it sounded like I was lying to him in order to try and change the subject, or even forgetting about it, I was struggling with what I was feeling about what happened back in the temple. Spike has been with me the entire time, and now here I am keeping secrets from him which he has a right to know about. Who am I to be considered his friend if I'm withholding something that could very well change the dynamic of how we operate as partners? I needed some way of explaining the situation, but my mind was just drawing a blank.
There is something on my mind right now, and while you should know about it, I just can't seem to get myself to say anything. If it's important but too hard for you to explain, then I don't need to know about it,
said Spike.
What are you saying?
I asked.
You must have your reasons for wanting to keep it bottled up inside, and I'm completely fine with it, as it's probably something that I wouldn't understand. I won't say anything else about it, so let's forget it and start making our way to the next temple,
replied Spike.
Are you sure?
I asked.
Very sure. That ring of fire that we saw above the peak of Death Mountain. There is something unnatural about it. I believe we should go back to Kakariko village and inquire as to what is going on up there on the mountain. We may even learn what's been happening with the Gorons, as the mountain is their home,"
replied Spike.
"I do recall what Sheik said about the locations of the 5 temples, and that one of them was on top of a high mountain,"
I said.
"Looks like we have our destination,"
said Spike. How could he be so chipper about all of this, knowing that I was keeping something from him which was too important to just simply ignore? All of a sudden, a familiar whooshing sound came out of the next clearing, and I ran towards the sound, hoping that it was who I thought it would be. Sure enough, Sheik was standing there in the center of the clearing with her arms folded as though she knew I was going to be coming this way, and had been waiting for me to come. How could she have known something that not even I had even thought about?
"You have overcome many trials in the forest temple and awakened the sage. The first step on your new journey has been good to you so far, yet I am sensing that there is something on your mind based on how you were unable to explain things to your partner,"
said Twilight. She walked a few steps towards me before coming to a complete stop, where she folded her arms again.
"Are you surprised that I am aware of such knowledge as this? The trees around here are able to echo the sounds that come from all around, so the conversation you had just now was easy enough for me to hear. What makes you think that something is bothering me?"
I asked.
"There is no need to hide something that is simple enough to figure out,"
replied Twilight. She then walked around me several times as though she were trying to observe me or something, but when she was finished, she walked back to the center of the clearing and beckoned me to come on over.
"While you were able to break the curse on the forest temple, it came with a terrible price that has been affecting you mentally, yes? During the battle with Phantom Ganon, much like what happened when I took on Ganondorf 7 years ago. I transformed when I was pushed to the edge of my mental stress and allowed my emotions to go out of control,"
I replied.
"What does this transformation entail?"
asked Twilight.
"It involves me gaining pony ears and a pony tail, along with a sudden increase in both power and confidence. While it feels natural to transform and unleash the power hidden within me, something else happens, which is where my problem lies. My transformations have been the result of when I allow my anger and frustration to gain the better of me due to being under so much pressure,"
I replied.
"And does this involve using the Master Sword?"
asked Twilight as she stared intently at the diving blade.
"You know that I don't know how to use a sword,"
I replied.
"Which you have mentioned to me in the past, yet it seems that you are quite capable of wielding it when you have changed your appearance. You fear that this transformation of yours will end up costing someone close to you their lives, or that your own life will be brought to an end, as you fear that you cannot fully control the power increase you gain. It acts like a raging demon deep inside of you that wishes to be unleashed, and when it happens, you lose all sense of self and allow it to take control of your actions,"
said Twilight.
"So far, I've managed to maintain some kind of influence over myself when I transform, but I fear I won't be able to control it forever and end up doing something I'll regret later. My transformation is usually meant to be the result of singing and friendship, and I assumed that was the case when I changed before Ganondorf. Now, because of this recent change against his phantom, I believe they are the result of anger. Perhaps the true extent of my equestrian magic is corrupted in this world, or it could be me who is corrupted," I said.
I didn't notice that Sheik reacted when she heard me mention the word equestrian, but I was more fixated on the fact that I was starting to have a nervous breakdown. I dropped to my knees and buried my face into my hands, where I started to freak out a little before standing back up.
I needed to do that just now as a means of venting out some of my own frustration. What is this equestrian magic?
Asked Twilight.
It's the magic that comes from my true home, Equestria. And for a time it became corrupted with darkness before I was shown a better path. For the most part, the good magic that's within me has been just that, but when I transform, it becomes twisted as though I wasn't the same person anymore.
I replied.
Perhaps this magic of yours when you achieve your other form and the magical energies that exist all over Hyrule are not able to coexist together,
said Twilight. She then walked over again, and jumped over me while drawing the Master's sword from its scabbard before landing and taking a close look at it. After swinging it around a few times in order to maybe show off, she walked back to me and sheathed it before jumping over me again and landing in the center of the clearing before turning to face me again.
You need to learn how to wield the Blade of Evil's Bane. It seems the only time I can use it is when I've transformed, I said. And that is a problem to you because of the lack of self-control you experience when you change. You must change your way of thinking and learn to wield the Master Sword even if you don't want to, for you will have need of its might in the trials to come,
said Twilight.
Can you teach me how to use a sword? You seemed to know what you were doing when you were swinging the Master Sword around,
I said.
I am not the one who can teach you how to fight with a weapon of steel, but there is one who will be able to show you a way. To me, all you need are the basics of swordplay, and you can handle using the Master Sword for the times when you need it. You can still rely heavily on the use of your magic as that is only natural of you,
said Twilight.
So who can teach me?
I asked.
You are heading to Death Mountain for the next sage you seek is there, yet someone from the past is waiting for you to help her out once again. She is one who knows the way of combat as it's in her blood, and so she will be the one who will teach you. I am certain that you know someone on the mountain who has the warrior's spirit dwelling inside of her. Perhaps before climbing up Death Mountain, you should return to the ranch and wind down a little as you look to have need of some relaxation. Go there first in order to resolve lingering issues, and then return to the Temple of Time,
replied Twilight. It looked as though she was about to leave as she did have a Deku nut in her hand, and was taking a few steps backward, but then she stopped and looked down at the ground before resuming again.
There are other secrets besides the one you've been keeping to yourself. What do you mean?
I asked.
It seems that Ganondorf's reign over Hyrule isn't as absolute as he would like to assume it to everyone. He has been searching the kingdom for 7 years now looking for something he claims will enable him to be the complete master of all he surveys. I don't know what he is aiming to accomplish with this plan, but he has made certain to pour all of his resources into acquiring what he seeks. There is one other secret you must know, and it has to do with the sole surviving member of the old royal guard of Hyrule Castle whom many believed died during the conflict. No one knows where he is right now, but I am certain that you will cross paths with him,
replied Twilight.
How do you know so much about this survivor?
I asked.
He once visited Kakariko village. That is all I can say as the rest is a secret to no one but him. Sunset Shimmer, I have managed to give you a small amount of insight as to what you should be doing, but in the end only you can make the final choice. I shall see you again,
replied Twilight. She then threw the Deku nut onto the ground where it flashed, and within an instant she was gone. What she had said did leave me confused at first, for how did she know exactly what my problem was? There was much more to Sheik that first impressions can provide, and if anyone was keeping secrets, it would be her, as she was perhaps the biggest secret of all. However, she was right about the fact that I did want to go back to Lon Lon Ranch, as I wanted to know how Apple Bloom was doing, and if Big Macintosh had changed his ways. With this new resolve, I left the Lost Woods by using a random exit, as it led me right back to Kokiri Forest, and I left there as I didn't want to ruin the happy moment that the Kokiri were currently experiencing. Epona reared up and neighed a loud neigh, as she was so happy that I had returned after being gone for so long.
"So that's what you were keeping to yourself this entire time?"
asked Spike.
"I knew something was wrong after I transformed in the forest temple against Phantom Ganon," I replied. "If you think that I'm upset with you for not wanting to let me in on it, know that I'm not angry with you, Sunset Shimmer, as you were in an awkward position. Now that I know that you have this problem regarding that transformation of yours, I think it's for the best that you don't use it under any circumstances, no matter how much pressure you may be in," said Spike. "Then who is supposed to teach me how to use the Master Sword?" I asked. Sheik was obviously hinting at Darunia, as who else on Death Mountain is a lover of fighting as one who fights with so much gusto like her? Asked Spike. "She did say that it sounded like Darunia could be in trouble," I replied. Because I wasn't entirely sure of the actual situation taking place there, rushing headlong to help her out would only make things worse. I climbed up onto Epona and rubbed her muzzle with my hand before I gave her a gentle kick to the ribs, where she began to start galloping along happily. I only just noticed that the moon had gone down and the sun was about to rise, and what was surprising was that I was still awake, as normally I would have rested for the night. Oh well, I'll just find some way of catching a little shut-eye later, as right now I need to focus on the task at hand. It didn't take long for Epona to make her way to Lon Lon Ranch, and the first thing I noticed was that there were no dark clouds, a sign that the evil that once plagued this place was gone. "It looks like things are peaceful," I commented. "One can only hope," added Spike. While Ingo was cruel beyond all reasoning, especially towards the horses, he did manage to turn this place around, even if his methods were contrived. "I just hope that he was willing to give the ranch back to the rightful owner," I said. "And if he hasn't?" asked Spike. "I'm not sure what will happen to the ranch," I replied. I urged Epona to enter the ranch, where things did look normal at first, but that notion quickly shattered when I noticed Big Mac standing by the gate which he had installed, but he was no longer wearing that fancy outfit of his, and was instead wearing the same work duds I saw him in 7 years ago. As soon as we galloped up next to him, he turned towards me and looked up in order to greet me, and I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable about the whole thing. Ingo? You look different today than before."
Was that seriously my best line when it came to dealing with him? Deep down, I had just made a complete dork of myself.
"Hi there. How are you? My name is Ingo. I'm so glad to have the honor of working here,"
said Big Mac.
"Are you all right?"
I asked.
Yup. I wish to welcome you to Lon Lon Ranch, the happiest place in all of Hyrule, where you get to ride amazing horses, and sample the legendary Lon Lon milk. One drink and you will be in absolute bliss. What do you think of our catchy slogan? I'm sure it will draw people here to the ranch, especially since now we've taken the time to get it up to standard when it was stagnant for the last few years," replied Big Mac. "What about the owner?" I asked. "You mean Talon?" I hear that she is still in Kakariko village, having since returned from an expedition to Death Mountain, which was a dangerous thing to do. That place has been having some problems recently, what with rumors flying around that the Gorons have upped and disappeared. That is a rumor, mind you, so I don't know how true it is, but maybe you can ask someone in the village, as they would know more about the activities of Death Mountain apart from the Gorons themselves,"
replied Big Mac.
"I'll be sure to ask them then, as you just gave me some very vital information," I said. "I aim to please,"
smiled Big Mac.
"Where is the owner's granddaughter?"
I asked.
"She is over there by the entrance to the corral. She said that she was planning on restarting an old favorite activity that the ranch used to do back in the day, and I think you should check it out, young lady, as you look like the kind of person who would enjoy such an exciting challenge,"
replied Big Mac. I thanked him for the suggestion, and Epona trotted off to where Apple Bloom was standing, which was by the gates of the corral. The first thing I noticed was that Ingo, or rather Big Mac's mugshot, was no longer featured on the gates, and that Apple Bloom wasn't carrying around a pail and looking all miserable. I slowly brought Epona to a stop and climbed down, where I engaged in a conversation with her.
"Oh, it's you who helped out the other day. I don't suppose I reckon that I didn't get your name from before,"
said Apple Bloom.
"My name?"
I asked.
"What's the matter? Are you nervous or something?"
asked Apple Bloom.
"No, it's just that you surprised me over the fact that you don't seem to recognize me, seeing as I look the same now as I did 7 years ago. But, to answer your question, my name is Sunset Shimmer,"
I replied.
"Really? I knew it was you when I realized you looked familiar to me, and also when you made that little slip-up y'all had with me when you said that I didn't hear a word you said when you called me by that nickname you gave me. Sunset Shimmer. It feels like forever since I last got to speak with you. Do you remember who I am?"
asked Apple Bloom.
"I remember," I replied. "I'm glad that you remember me, and of course Epona remembers you as well, seeing as you were able to tame her when Ingo couldn't. Speaking of Mr. Ingo, no doubt that you are surprised by the fact that he has changed. After you were able to take Epona away from the ranch, he started to freak out over the fact that he lost his finest horse, and Ganondorf was going to find out about it and punish him. It truly upset him to the point where he refused to see anyone, including me, for the entire day. I was actually worried about his sanity for a while, and that maybe he was thinking of ending his own life or something. But then this morning, his attitude completely changed,"
said Apple Bloom.
"How so?" I asked. "He had gone back to being a normal nice person again, just like he had been many years ago before my grandmother became lazy. I suspect that he had a lot of evil inside of him which had been building up for years, and when you got Epona out of here, that was enough to remove all of that darkness in his heart, and changing him back to normal. In fact, when he confronted me this morning wearing his old work duds, he apologized for everything he had done, and he handed over not only that fancy uniform of his, but also his resignation, as he felt he didn't deserve to work here anymore. I of course forgave him for his actions, as I too had to apologize for not trying to resolve the issue much sooner, so in that sense we were both guilty of doing wrong. Now Mr. Ingo is happily resuming his work as a farmhand once again, and this time I intend on making sure that he will have as much help as he needs, be it from myself, Granny, or hopefully that derpy girl who worked here months ago,"
replied Apple Bloom.
"What of your grandmother? Have you heard anything from her?" I asked. I heard from the villagers over in Kakariko village that she returned from climbing Death Mountain the other night, so I gather that she isn't aware Mr. Ingo has graciously given ownership back to her, and that she can come back here as soon as possible. I'd like to be able to go there and tell her myself, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done around here. If you happen to be heading over to the village at some point in your travels, would you mind letting Granny know what's happened here?
Asked Apple Bloom.
I'd be glad to,
I replied.
For the first time in what feels like forever, I can safely say that peace is finally returning to the ranch, and it's all thanks to you, Sunset Shimmer. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart,
said Apple Bloom. Hearing her say that made me blush, as that was the first time anyone had ever been that gracious to me in this world. That was when Apple Bloom walked over and checked on Epona for a few minutes before walking back over to me.
Judging from the condition that she is in right now, you have certainly tamed Epona well, and I feel that you two will make a fantastic team. I still feel bad for whipping her too hard,
I said.
Maybe so, but Epona trusted you enough that you knew what you were doing, and it turned out that such a reckless course of action was needed as it allowed you to save the ranch,
said Apple Bloom.
Yes, I suppose so,
I said.
Say, how would you like to take part in a little challenge? The rules are very simple to follow. You will go around the corral 2 times, jumping over fences of various heights in order to see how fast you can complete it. If you can beat the record, then you will receive a fantastic present, but I must warn you that it isn't going to be easy. My record is 50 seconds, so you will need to finish the course in 49 seconds or less to secure victory,
said Apple Bloom.
I'm sure that I can beat your record if you say that Epona and I are a good team,
I said.
Quite the confident one, aren't you? If you will give me and Mr. Ingo about 30 minutes, we will get your challenge ready,
said Apple Bloom.
Why 30 minutes?
I asked.
It takes time for us to get all of the fences into position, even though we have the horses aid us in the moving. It's not like Hyrule is a modern society with all kinds of crazy inventions to make our lives easier or something,
replied Apple Bloom. She did make a valid point, and also made a reference to modern life in the human world without even probably realizing it, so I decided to wait around by taking a short nap. Apple Bloom then woke me up 30 minutes later to inform me that the obstacle course was ready to go. When I glanced at the setup that she and Big Mac had provided for me, I began to feel nervous, as the fences were both numerous in number and quite close together in many cases. I looked towards Epona, who gave me a concerned look, as she was also worried that this wasn't going to be easy. Apple Bloom noticed my concern and walked me over to my trusty horse as a means of reassuring me that this was going to be fun.
If you reckon that I'm going to charge you a small fee for playing, then you'd be wrong, as that wouldn't be fair to you. Thanks, Apple Bloom,
I said in a nervous voice.
I haven't had you call me that in years, apart from that one little slip-up,
smiled Apple Bloom.
At least you're accepting of such a name,
I said.
Not sure why anyone would be offended by such pleasant little nicknames, but then I can't really answer for their taste in names now. Anyway, just climb onto Epona and make your way over to the starting line and we can get this started,
said Apple Bloom. Epona whinnied as I climbed onto her, and she trotted over to where the start was.
Just remember to have fun with this race and you'll do fine. Oh, I forgot to mention one important thing. You must jump over all of the fences. You will automatically fail if you miss even a single jump.
What? I exclaimed.
Sorry for not mentioning it earlier, as I guess that I was caught up in the moment,
said Apple Bloom. Knowing that little tidbit just made me feel even worse, but there was no turning back for me now, as I had to go through with it.
Ready? Go.
I gave a soft kick to Epona's ribs and she began galloping and managed to jump over the first few fences, but when we came up to a series of 3 fences in a row, she was able to leap over the first one, but she couldn't jump over the second, which felt frustrating at first, but I quickly realized that she needed some speed in order to make such jumps in succession. It was too late to whip her to go faster, so we had no choice but to gallop back to the first fence, and make all 3 jumps again using the appropriate speed. By the time we made it around the corral once after experiencing a similar mishap with just one large fence, Apple Bloom called out and said that Epona and I had taken 35 seconds to complete the lap, so we had to get around the corral again in only 15 seconds, and that was going to be an impossibility. Once we completed the second lap, I had Epona slowly come to a stop, and she felt really rejected knowing that we didn't complete the challenge under the time limit.
So how long did we take?
I asked.
You completed both laps in about 1 minute and 23 seconds, which, to be honest with you, was really pitiful, as I was expecting you and Epona to at least finish at around 54 seconds on your first attempt. While you did jump over all of the fences, it was jumping over multiple fences in a row which got you stumped. I'm not saying that you two are a terrible pair, as that would be spitting on what you did the other day, but maybe you ought to get in some practice before trying again,
replied Apple Bloom.
I think we'll try again right now,
I said.
Are you sure that you want to?
Asked Apple Bloom.
Without a doubt,
I replied.
Okay then,
said Apple Bloom. Epona trotted back over to the starting line where Apple Bloom gave us the signal to begin the challenge again, and while we did manage to jump over the fences at the proper speed, I ended up whipping her one too many times, which caused her to completely slow down at a vital point on the course, which was around the final set of fences before the starting line. When we crossed the line this time around after completing 1 lap, Apple Bloom mentioned that we had now taken 28 seconds, which was faster than before, but we could be much faster than that according to my own opinion. The second lap pretty much went the same as the first, where I ended up tiring out Epona at the same location, and when we crossed the finish line, she came to a stop of her own accord and reared up onto her hind legs as a sign of being frustrated with herself for getting exhausted too soon. Apple Bloom then came walking over to me and she had a dejected look across her face, which meant to me that we failed the challenge once again.
This time you managed to complete the obstacle course in about 58 seconds, which is much better than before, but it's still not fast enough to beat my personal best. The problem now is that I'm whipping her too much, which causes her to run out of steam,
I said.
That's not surprising, as a horse can only be whipped so much to increase their speed before getting tired out, and forced to be sluggish for a few moments. I think the problem is that you need to whip her only so much to allow you to make it over the fences, then allow her to gallop slowly before resuming the speed again. You want to go back and forth between slow and fast. I know you want to try it once more, as you have the determination in your eyes,
said Apple Bloom.
I'm not giving up until this is finished, I said. Let's see if the third time is indeed the charm,
said Apple Bloom as Epona trotted over to the starting line again and began to prepare herself for the challenge.
You two need to be as one if you plan on being a pair, as both horse and rider must be of the same self in heart and mind. That's what Granny often said to me back in the day, as she was quite the fine rider before she retired. Ready? Go.
I gave Epona the gentle rib kick and she galloped off with a fast start, which meant she was determined to break Apple Bloom's record. This time I took her advice by whipping Epona only when necessary and to allow her to gallop along at her own pace before needing to pick up speed. There was a brief freak-out moment where she clipped her hoof on the second tall fence we jumped over, and I whinnied to her to ask if she wanted to stop, but her responding whinny was that she wanted to keep on going. After clearing the first lap, Apple Bloom said that we had taken 24 seconds, so now we were even faster, but we still needed to get around the corral again. Epona's hoof continued to give her some slight pain, but she shrugged it off as she jumped over the fences, and I whipped her when it was necessary. When she jumped over the final fence and galloped towards the starting line, her hoof buckled, which made her lose her balance for a moment, but I was able to righten her back where she crossed the line and slowly came to a stop.
"We should have just stopped the challenge when you injured your foot," I said.
Epona then whinnied at me to indicate that she was okay, and that the pain was minimal at best, for all she wanted was to prove that we could beat Apple Bloom's record. While I admire her for wanting to keep on going, it was foolish as she was risking further injury to her hoof. Apple Bloom herself then walked over with a smile on her face, although I was more focused on whether Epona was okay, or that her hoof could be more injured than originally expected.
"Here, you should use this medicine so that Epona can recover from that injury to her hoof,"
said Apple Bloom.
"Do you always carry one of those around?"
I asked.
"When you've been taking care of horses as long as I have, you get a sixth sense for these things. Anyway, the time it took you two to complete 2 laps around the corral this time is 49 seconds, and that means you broke my record, so congratulations. I have to give you a fantastic present for such an accomplishment, but it's a little too heavy for you to carry around, so I'll have it delivered to your house, so whenever you visit your home sometime in the future, you'll see your prize with your own eyes,"
replied Apple Bloom.
"You realize that my home is in a forest, right?"
I asked.
"Of course, as you're a forest girl, as who else would wear something like that? It will take about a day or 2 to deliver your present, and I will personally see to the delivery myself, so you don't have to worry about it,"
replied Apple Bloom.
"Thank you," I smiled. "By the way, when you go to Kakariko Village in order to speak to my grandmother, you should know that things there haven't been all that pleasant due to what has been going on regarding Death Mountain and the Gorons. I heard that Ganondorf's followers came through the village about several months ago and went up the mountain for some reason, but the villagers would probably know more about something like that than I would,"
said Apple Bloom.
"Ganondorf's followers!"
I exclaimed as it all started to come together in my mind that Ganondorf was up to something once again. As I began to grill Apple Bloom for more information regarding this rumor, she mentioned, something was happening far away. In the middle of a giant patch of solid ice, a large hole had been created as though someone had either punched through it, or used some kind of magic to break through. Someone was on the edge of the hole, breathing heavily and drenching in water as a result of being stuck underneath the ice for what felt like years.
Gasp! Gasp! "Are you all right? Who are you?" "My name is Sheik, and I have taken the liberty of freeing you from being trapped under the ice sheet. Even now as I speak, the ice continues to grow stronger, and soon there will be nothing left but a frozen barren wasteland devoid of life. But what about the rest of the Zoras?" "I am sorry, but you were the only one that I was able to rescue from the ice flow,"
replied Twilight.
"Then does that mean the other Zoras remain trapped under the ice, where they will remain until the curse on your domain has been broken? If you wish to rescue your people from their plight, you will need to find some way of breaking the curse," replied Twilight. I must go to the temple in Lake Hylia, as I'm sure that is where the source of the curse lies. Do you intend to go there alone?
Asked Twilight.
Of course, as I am more than capable of going there and figuring out what needs to be done. You should know that you are speaking to the Princess of the Zoras, and I will find a way to save my father and the others. Thank you for rescuing me, Sheik, and I do appreciate it, but right now I cannot be distracted with idle chit-chat as I must go to the temple immediately. You are strong, Ruto, Zora Princess, but you will not succeed in defeating the curse alone. The chosen hero of destiny will one day come to your aid just like she did before, and only together will you succeed in rescuing the Zoras. I must go and prepare for the next encounter with you, Sunset Shimmer, and hopefully you'll have started to figure out an answer to the problem that consumes your very thoughts.
Twilight said to herself. To be continued. Chapter 25, The Missing Tribe.